I'm loving the pop off.
What's good? Welcome back to the Pop Off Podcast, a conversation show about the Bear, Season 3, Episodes 1 through 5. I'm your host, Ralph Compiano, and I am joined by one of my favorite people, my favorite low-key TV critics in the world, Jack Turner. You've watched a lot of TV in your day, man. Where does the Bears stack up amongst the rest of the TV shows that you've watched over the last 5 or 6 years?
Well, I'm thinking about the shows that have just recently kind of came out or started back up again this summer that have a lot of fanfare. The Boys, House of Dragon, and then The Bear, right? And The Bear so far, we're only doing episodes 1 through 5. But through 5 episodes, it's by far my favorite out of these 3 that have came out. The Boys is going on season 4 now, Bear season 3. I still like each of these shows a lot, but for some reason I'm able to just connect a lot more with The Bear, whether it's the pacing or the storytelling, or the many camera shots they have, the cameos this year. We can talk a little bit about that as well. But it's definitely up there. It's definitely up there.
Yeah, even in a larger perspective than the shows that it coexists alongside right now, but even shows like Atlanta, Barry, Succession over the last 6 or 7 years. I think it's on that Mount Rushmore, since Breaking Bad and Mad Men ended for me. I mean, I love this show. The criticisms of this season so far have been pretty intense. I haven't heard anybody that's outwardly saying this is their favorite season amongst the 3. They're comparing it to the first 2. Do you try to avoid that comparison in your mind? When you watch a season of TV like this, do you try to separate it from the previous 2 seasons, or are you you know what, this is a continuation of it and I have to stack it up against those other 2?
No, I don't really do too much comparison between the 3. I do like how this season is called back to different moments of season 1 and season 2. Primarily the episode Fishes, right, with the Christmas dinner, and just some other moments that have happened in season 1 and season 2. That's something I really have liked about this season, is it doesn't take those moments lightly. You can see some shows where something crazy happens. The Boys is a good example. Something absolutely insane happens, and obviously they're different shows, but they don't ever really necessarily call back to it, or nobody has any trauma necessarily from those moments, or has flashbacks, or we see Carmy really dealing with the struggles of some of these different moments in his life. And it feels like as viewers, we just keep getting a deeper and deeper understanding of these people, and these characters become more and more fleshed out with time. And so in that sense, I do like season 3 a lot, and I don't necessarily look at it as much of a comparison, more of a continuation of these stories. You mentioned Atlanta. I think The Bear is a lot like Atlanta in the way it's willing to take risks on an episode-to-episode basis in terms of how they tell the story. Not all the episodes are going to be alike. I think we'll talk maybe in an episodic format here tonight, and talk about episode 1, right, which had very little dialogue, very fast pacing, lots of flashbacks, the timeline's kind of jumping all over the place. You don't get that with a lot of different shows willing to take those risks. And then Succession, I think there's times where the dialogue in this show can match Succession in terms of how quickly and snappily everybody's talking. It feels real. It feels like people that have a lot of history together and have the ability to kind of say things that you don't really say or could get away with saying unless you had that long time friendship or family to lean back on. So definitely pulling a lot of things from different episodes or different television shows that we love, right, into The Bear.
Yeah, and to your point about Succession, it's not billed as a comedy, but it's one of the funniest things on TV. The Boys is probably supposed to be more comedically timed than this, but I think The Bear is just, it gives me the biggest laughs. I actually laugh out loud watching this show. For the seasons, I think that it's undeniable that this one has been a little bit more pretentious. I think that's because Christopher Storer, he is, it's an autobiographical show. He has a history of cooking, his family does, so this is very real for him. This is a real experience on his end, and he is so similar to Carmy, I would imagine. And I mean, just from a pretentiousness standpoint, I think that is almost a resistance to how popular it's become. Because if you remember season 1 and season 2, it's season 1, it was just a miracle. It just came along. FX, FX and Hulu have had some really good collaborations like Atlanta. And everybody's holy fuck, this show was not supposed to be this good. Especially with the budget they were working with, the lack of experience amongst the cast members, like in Io Itabiri. She turns out to be a superstar. She's getting all these roles after it. And then season 2 carries that momentum, and it just gets more and more popular. It's like Twitter's favorite show. Critics are loving it. It was the meeting in the Venn diagram between critics loved it and audiences loved it. And when that happens, that's just like a snowball effect. And then Twitter gets a hold of it, and Instagram and all these kinds of things.
Ralph, that's a good point out. It is a lot more pretentious. I love that shit. I love like the way they're taking risks, taking chances with the storytelling. And I think that a show that maybe went a little bit too far the other way and was kind of matched with both critic applause and then the fan base, people, everyday people that loved it, was Ted Lasso. And I feel like they went a lot further towards like the fan service side, and the show really suffered because of it. And it's a show that I've kind of just like fell out of interest with as they continue to just maybe fall into those storylines around season 3. So for me, at least, I kind of like the direction it's going, but I can see maybe being a little bit more of a turn off to some people that are looking for maybe more of just to throw on the television, background television show type thing that I think the Bear kind of was a little bit in season 1. It was a little bit more of your standard workplace comedy with some, obviously drama built in and some serious discussions around, like death and whatnot. But
I mean, it's always been uncut gems in the kitchen. Like, it's always had that anxiety-inducing thing. So, like, I'm going to turn to Brooklyn Nine-Nine for my background TV before I am the Bear. Because, like, I was trying to watch, episode 6, which we're not going to talk about, last night before bed, though. And I was like, this can't be the last thing I watch before bed. Like, I'm going to have sad nightmares or something like that. So it has become like a little bit more dramatic. And the other like big picture thing is that, in this season, Carmi, it's like his first time really running a restaurant, and we can talk about the episodes, but the non-negotiables, the biggest one that people have an issue with is a new menu every day. And I think that's a good like metaphor actually for what this, like what you said, like they're taking risks with each of these episodes. The first one is so much unlike the other 4 that we're going to talk about today.
Let's get into it.
So yeah, we can just start episode 1. This episode is called Tomorrow.
Before we get into episode 1, Ralph, for the rest of this conversation, the rest of this podcast today, would you prefer an environment that encourages razzle dazzle and the dreamweave, or more of a vibrant collaboration?
Razzle dazzle and the dreamweave. I was gonna say that. All right, so like this show is billed as like Carmi and Sid's show, like Io Itabiri and Jeremy Allen White. They're the celebrities for it. This is Richie's show to me now. Like, especially this season, every moment that I spend with him is my favorite moment of the episode. Like, I adore him, his razzle dazzle, his vernacular. He has an obsession with like Michael Mann and like William Friedkin. Like, this is just my kind of guy. I fucking love him.
His movies work on many levels.
Yes, right. He's talking about like The Exorcist, and it's like, I mean, they do to a certain extent for sure, The French Connection, but like, yeah, I mean, I just love him. So yeah, I'm Dreamweave guy. We can Dreamweave this for sure.
All right.
Okay, so episode 1 is called Tomorrow. This is it's a glorified version of a previously on this TV show, right? Like, we are doing a lot of montaging about Carmi's journey through different kitchens with different chefs and his experiences and how he became the Carmi that we know right now. Now, normally when I say something like that, I say the Carmi that we know and love. I wanted to ask you just your overall opinion on Carmi right now through 5 episodes, because I am in a position where I'm like, I thought I loved this dude. I thought I was rooting for him, but he's really starting to tick me off, just like he is everybody else in his life.
It's not a love or hate thing. It's just more of an understanding. And I think this episode continues to do that, or help me come to that understanding of like how much pain he's dealing with. The way this episode sets the scene for season 1, not only, as you mentioned, does a great job of calling back and kind of bringing the viewers back into the fold of what's taking place. How did we get here? I love when they build up like his chef lore. So we saw him with Luca, played by Will Poulter, right? And he's like kind of just like running it up on him. He's doubling it up. And like they started off as like equals, and you can quickly see that Carmi's character kind of like rises above him. And so like the lore, the background, I love that shit. I'm like, God, he's just a beast in the kitchen. And you see him putting a lot of those learnings and the teachings he's gained along the way from the 3 chefs they highlight in between, I think, Chef Terry, Joel McHale's character, then this older man that they don't really give as much backstory to, but he seems like a real sweetheart. And he's putting a lot of that and that passion into his cooking as he's resetting the menu for the next day at the Bear.
Right.
But on the
It's like he's taking
equal
those
side,
lessons that he's learning and he's applying them to the bear. Like we're figuring out why he is the way he is and which one was the most influential, right? Like you
mhm,
cite those three chefs. He's taking, I think, the most from Joel McHale, who is literally like the personification of evil. Like I'm a
right?
basketball coach. If I talk to any of my kids like this, like I would feel so guilty at the end of every single day. Like, yeah, he literally just walks by Carmi at one point when he's just like, I don't know, cooking up a sauce, and he just literally goes, "Fuck you." And it's it's like that's it. Like I'm like, oh my god, like I get scared when he comes onto the scene. And like the main ingredient or lesson that Carmi takes away from him is one, that kind of brutality, that harshness, that like just obsession and passion, but like voiced in a negative way. But the real lesson that he takes away is subtract. And
Mhm.
he wants there to be no repeat ingredients at his restaurant. He wants everything. He believes less is more because that's what Joel McHale taught him.
And on the flip side of like all the lessons he's putting into this new menu, he's also like putting a lot of like he's like trauma dumping into it as well.
Mm,
He's like putting a lot of his trauma. You see flashbacks of things or conversations he's had with his family members, and I think that really did a good job of like setting up Carmi as a person for this season, like and what he's dealing with, and like how he's escaping his trauma in his food. It's also what he's really good at. It's also what he's passionate about. But at the same time, he can't escape everything that's in his head. Like he's just trapped in his own head, and it's making him turn more and more manic as the season kind of goes along. And I think he's always probably had some of those qualities in him. It's probably what makes him such an excellent chef, right? Is that attention to detail. But at the same time, he's also like I don't know, not executing to the level he needs to be as a leader of the kitchen, and that's frustrating to watch. I think you really see Sydney really take on that role as kind of more the mentor and the person that people look to as a leader uh, for more of a I don't know, like an emotional standpoint, like actually connecting with them. I don't know, it's tough. I don't dislike Carmen because I feel like they do a good job of like letting you inside and understanding like what he's going through, but he's definitely a kind of a prick.
well, we also see Sydney's journey towards Carmi in this episode, and
Right,
it's
the full
shorter,
circle moment.
right? Like that full circle moment. But the thing about Carmi, I like that you mentioned like he can't escape these traumas. We're seeing his traumas. Like he's a creative person, he's a visionary, and he's like practically hallucinating because of these panic attacks, and he's getting these visions of his past, of Jamie Lee Curtis, of John Bernthal, of these like reckless family members that have shaped the way that he is and the anxieties that he's had. So I think that's really interesting just from a storytelling standpoint because it's like, whoa, like we haven't like even like with Damon and House of the Targaryen, like we haven't had a real hallucination in that show yet. And we would get bits and pieces of that so far in The Bear, but now they're like almost overwhelming us with it, where it's like every 12 minutes, Carmi is just bent over somewhere, fucking veins popping out of his forehead, and just
He
like
does have like
seeing
the
some
neck veins like crazy.
oh my god, he is like Bordy actually talked about it, and we're going to talk about episode 6 through 10 with him, and he was talking about how he reminds him of young Al Pacino. I think
Mm.
that's a great comparison because Pacino, like in Dog Day Afternoon and Serpico, and even in The Godfather, like Part 2 specifically, like
Serpico.
that's like that. It's the body language, it's the facial emotion, and it's like he can use every single like little niche part of his face to communicate one emotion really well, and that's angst. Like he is just like if I was a teenager going through puberty, this would be my favorite fucking show of all time because I'd be like, this guy gets it, dude. Like he's just kind of a man child.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Great episode. We got John Mulaney, a little cameo in there. I just love,
Love that.
they've really built out quite the cast of these
Oh
little
my
people and
god.
these the world building. Makes me think that this is a show. They already filmed season 4. I'm not sure what the intentions are for this show in terms of length or how far it can go, but as they continue to build these worlds and get more and more characters you care about, there's just more stories to tell.
Yes, right. And we don't even see his wife. I can't remember her name off the top of my head. But I love seeing
Right,
Olivia
except for
Colman again. Like
right that
Olivia
one little scene,
Colman
just
is
like
just
keep going. Yeah, Olivia
yep.
Colman, go ahead.
She's I think she's my favorite working actress still. It's like her and Emma Stone. Shout out to The Favorite. But like he doesn't take as much of her. Like she's kind of in between the Italian gentleman that we talked about who's like so loving, so gentle and kind and caring, and he teaches Carmi to love cooking even
Yeah,
more
it's
than
like
he already does.
listen to the music, the magic.
Yeah, that just like that director bullshit. Like that's really what he is, and he's like everything can be really sweet. Olivia Colman's like kind of between the two. We're like, but she sees his potential. Like that's where
Mhm.
she's so big because like she's like she sees that he's a creative, she sees that he draws, and she's like, you should go to Copenhagen and learn there.
She also seems emotionally intelligent.
Yes.
Like she like can like feel what Carmi's going through in some ways. Do you know what the timeline of those cooking experiences were? Like which restaurants he was at first?
I want to say that Mikhail was the last one because
Because
that's
that's
what
when he
brings
found
him
out.
back, right? Like that's when he
And
finds
that's when
out
he
about
found out
Bernthal.
that,
That's what brings him
yeah,
back to Chicago. And
yeah,
that's when I think he gets the scar on his hand too from the hot pot, which has to be like the hottest pot ever, which Molly Gordon talks about.
just because I
So
feel
yeah,
like
I
some
think
people are like,
he's gonna be
oh,
last.
he is acting a little bit like Joel McHale's character to Luca in Chef Terry's kitchen, right? But that doesn't
Yep.
necessarily indicate the right timeline where he kind of already had maybe some of that Joel McHale type character in him before even going to that, that learning experience or being the sous chef or stage or whatever he was there at that restaurant.
Yeah, I think that's from the family. That's got to be from growing up around Uncle Jimmy and the Facts and Bernthal and Dee Dee. And it's just like, oh, we just tell people to hurry the fuck up all the time at my house. Like, that's just normal. All right, moving on to episode 2. This episode is called Next / I call it Non-Negotiables.
Yeah.
The opening credits here, you wanted to talk about this.
Yeah.
Documentary style filmmaking, going through Chicago, showing a bunch of Chicagoans, restaurants, packing plants, bakeries, barbershops, fire departments, and homes. Really cool. I thought this was awesome. This was just, Christopher Storer being a Chicago guy. I think he's from there.
Yeah,
just
he's
like
from, I
paying,
think,
paying
right
homage to
outside
the city.
Chicago.
Yeah, really cool.
I'm not a Chicago native or anything, but I have lived here. It's where I reside for the last 2 years or so. And I love just, I'm from Des Moines. Probably has more small town energy than big city vibes. So like there's parts of just kind of living here and seeing the city become a character in the background that are very cool. And I get excited. I'll point and be like, oh shit, like I've been there. And like that just gets me fired up. So that's maybe a unique experience to myself or people that have lived in Chicago or around Chicago or visited. So I like that a lot. And then including got a local meat market. Going to give them a shout out. Quick ad. Paulina Meat Market down the road from me. Two of my favorite, I don't know what you want to call them, meat enthusiasts, sandwich artists, waving at the camera. It was a whole, I kind of felt like a verbal meme here. Leonardo DiCaprio from
Once Upon a
Time pointing at the TV like, those, I know those guys. It was great. Had the Pearl Jam in the background, a song that I think they bring back in episode 5 too, and kind of another montage scene. Just wonderful filmmaking, wonderful way to just set the tone and kind of bring you back into the city of Chicago, which they really do highlight throughout the entire show. After episode 1, where you're more or less kind of confined to the kitchen and Carmi's mind, so that was good too. I think that set the tone as a bit of a reset, because as we mentioned, episode 1's kind of a little bit of an outlier in terms of the way it was structured compared to the rest of the episodes so far this season. So yeah, I thought that was just a great intro.
Lights out. I loved it because it's emblematic of like what the city is. Because like we spend so much time in interior environments in this show. Like we're in the kitchen, like we're in an apartment with Sydney and her dad looking at a new spot, but we don't spend as much time like walking downtown Chicago, which is the first thing that I think of when I think of that city. And it's such a singular city too. Like we've had so many shows, so many movies that are set in New York and Los Angeles that it feels like, we've lived there for parts of our lives. Whereas Chicago, it's not taken advantage as much for a shooting location. One, because it's really expensive to shoot there. But two, like when people do shoot there, it's like the Dark Knight and they call it Gotham instead of Chicago. There aren't as many like Chicago-based movies and shows as there are New York or LA. So I love that. And also it's just like it makes sense that these people are from there. Just a reminder of like this is the environment that they've always grown up in, whether it's an Ibra or a Sydney or even a Carm. So I loved that.
And I think Chicago is becoming more of a destination to film. At least I'd have to ask like my 50-year-old uncles that just probably go and turn the TV on, but if they're into the Chicago Fire, Chicago Med, Chicago PD world. But yeah, you make good points.
Those are probably shot in Atlanta on a green screen.
I looked it up. It was shot in Chicago.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean they got the NBC budget, so they can probably afford it.
I'm sure it goes back and forth. I bet it's 50-50. I bet they do a lot of scenes out in LA. But yeah, this episode 2, non-negotiables, pretty funny. Kind of brings that comedic aspect back. Everything between Richie and Carm. I rewatched this episode. I love.
I did too.
Basically a fuck you off. I think I'm gonna have to put no fuck you, good sir. into my vocabulary. The good sir at the end had me rolling for a sec. But overall, I don't know. What were your thoughts if like you walked into the gym, right, and the head coach or another coach had these kind of non-negotiables and put them in front of you? What would your reaction be?
Great question, because you know me. I'm the kind of person that I do like leadership, but I also like having a voice. If I'm not going to say I like being the leader, I like to at least have a voice. So if they're not going to hear me out on the non-negotiables, and like they just came and like as a dictatorship and just like put it in front of my face and like this is it, like even if like my boss had done this, like I'd be like, well, what the fuck? Like there's no consultation here, especially if I'm a quote unquote partner like Sydney is, or like Richie is treated, because Carmi only runs one part of like the restaurant. He runs the kitchen. Like he's not responsible for everything out front like Richie is. Like Richie's the one that trained in that specific area.
Right.
So I understand his frustrations, of course, and then Sydney's as well, because he's making adjustments and accommodations to her meals.
Doug and Cicero kind of run more of the business side.
The financial side, yes, of course. So, I mean, I would be fucking pissed, especially if it's a guy that's like Carmi, that is clearly explosive and so fragile. Like if it came from like a stout leader that I believed in, like one of my colleagues, I believe in
George
her to the fullest extent. George Washington, sure. LeBron James. I'd be like, yeah, let's get behind this guy. But I mean, Carmi is not LeBron. Carmi is like Ben Simmons. Like it could go either way in this career, and one could be a brick. And
the
like,
one thing I will give Carmi credit for, though, right, is they've tried to make it a little bit less like this, but he really is elevating a bunch of nobodies.
Sure. I totally like LeBron.
Like his name being at that restaurant is what gives it validity and credit, and his drive, his push. It's if the bear fails, like Sydney might have a little bit of like, oh shit, like this doesn't look good for some of my, like, you know, as I've elevated myself in the in this world, but Carmi's gonna be the one that takes the brunt if it's a failure. Like that's his name, that's his reputation. That would be the failure of this. But to your point, at the same time, there's different ways you could go about it.
Well, I agree. He is elevating a bunch of nobodies, but to their credit, if I'm going to support the Kyle Korvers and the J.R. Smiths, they have completely elevated. Tina's a totally different character now. Sydney, like I think she's always had this potential. Like she would have been like a first overall draft pick, and now she is like that meeting that she has with that guy outside of the subway station where they just run into each other, and he compliments a dish at the restaurant, and she's like, "Yeah, that was my dish," and he's like, "Yeah, it didn't feel like a Carmi. Like it felt like somebody else." And I love that moment because I love Sid and I'm behind her all the way and I'm rooting for her. And when these arguments occur between her and a Carmi, or Carmi and anybody, because that's really like the whole premise of this episode is that one person comes in after the other into the kitchen. We start out with Nat / Shug and Carmi, and they're beefing about like you should call your mom, you should call your girlfriend, this kind of stuff. And then it's Sydney in the contract. And then it's Richie and the non-negotiables and the voicemail and the battle of the fuck yous and the dojo. And yeah, I did want to say that quote. That was my favorite quote of the episode. They're like, we have facts coming here. And he said, the facts are on the way, plural facts. And they're like, how many? He's like, at least 2, but less than 5. And it's just like, I forgot how many facts there were because we spend so much time with only 2 of them. But we'll talk about another one in the cameo a little bit later.
Facts. Wait, no, 9. I always forget Avery.
9 facts. He always forgets. Yeah, always forgets Avery. Yeah, I mean,
and then Cicero walks in, and I think his name's Tim. You know, one of the other facts. What up, pimp? It's just like,
yep.
Like I love the whole dynamic of like the community they've built between just all these people that grew up together, right, in the same neighborhood, and whether like Cicero's kind of that more uncle figure to more than just like Carm and Nat. He is to Richie too, or the fact family. It's just some good added like background and levity there.
I mean, they've been through so much shit. Like if you remember in season 1 where they're catering an event for Cicero and it's like his son's birthday or his grandson's birthday, even something like that, and they accidentally spike the water or Gatorade cooler with Xanax and all the kids pass out, and he's like, dude, it's all good. Like they passed out. They were annoying as fuck anyways. He's like, oh dude, they're gonna be zonked for like 3.5 hours. Like they've gone through so much. So your point about, I think it's Teddy is like, what's up, pimp, to Cicero. It's just like it's those little brief moments where it's like that informs the history. It doesn't have to be a flashback. It doesn't have to be them telling us a story that they experienced. It's those little things.
We can pause here too and maybe just give a shout out to Matty Masterson. He's the only person from this cast that's considered an executive producer on this show. Uh, I'd like to think that most people that watch this show are like kind of aware who he is, but as I talk to some of my friends or people that are watching, like they just don't know, which is fine, I guess. Too. Matty Masterson, pretty famous.
Neil Fack,
world like Verge world famous chef, restaurateur, owns 11 restaurants. Helped write the first episode. He's obviously in the writer's room, executive producer, has that level of background and detail of what like a chef and what a professional restaurant looks like, which makes the idea that he's kind of like the buffoon of the restaurant like kind of fun. Just a nice little like wink and nod to his personal life and the fact that like he's working with all these actors and he's really the one that probably has any idea what the hell would be going on in a kitchen of this caliber. So shout out to Matty Masterson. I can see him hopefully, I don't know, continuing acting in future roles because he's so charismatic. And we see John Cena as a cameo later in the season, and John Cena is playing pretty much one character at this point in a lot of his roles, but they're funny, and it's always a welcome presence on the screen. And I could say the same for like Matty Masterson of Fact. Like he could just play that guy in a lot of different roles or shows or movies, and I would always welcome his energy and his charisma.
He might have market corrected Action Bronson. Like this would have been like a perfect Bronson part. Like if he would have continued his acting journey from The Irishman. But to your point about Matty Matheson, it's like we can talk about episode 3 now. This is the eulogy. It's called Doors, and this is kind of the montage of how the Bear is doing, like as a restaurant. And there's a moment where Matty Matheson takes out the mirepoix, which is essentially like a elevated jardiniere broth, and he takes it out to somebody, and he pours it in front of them, and then he just walks right back into the kitchen with the same thing that he just picked up. And he's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And it's just so funny if you know the background of Matheson being like, "Oh, dude, this guy can chef it the fuck up." He literally
he's
owns
so proud of
restaurants.
himself too.
Yeah, and he's like, and then I think Richie says to him, he says, "Never fucking again. Absolutely not. Never again." Yeah, he's so like, I mean, I was raking my brain, like trying to think of like who are my favorite characters at this point in the Bear, and Richie's number one with a bullet, the same way that Fact talks about Carmy when he's listing off his best friends. And then I would say like number 2 like might be Neil. Like I love spending time with him, and I think Cicero's up there too. And then it would be Carmy and Sid. But those 3 supporting characters, I think, what really make the show. And he just brings so much life to it and levity because that moment between Richie and Carm, like you said, you were laughing at it in episode 2. I was tense. Well, and then Neil comes in and he's my voice of reason. He's like, "This is fucking weird. The vibe is weird." And he yells at Nat, and she's like, "The vibe is weird." She's like, "It's okay, sweetie. Like, I know."
Right.
And I just love that.
Bronson couldn't play that kind of like sweetness, right?
Right.
But no, you're right. It is tense. That's an episode I rewatched, and upon second viewing, it's kind of like Succession too, where like a lot of second viewing for Succession is just a lot funnier because like the dialogue's so good. Versus like the first time you're watching it through, it is more white knuckle and gripping. But yeah, I don't know. That was kind of more of a rewatch. Like, God, this dialogue's pretty funny. Yeah, that's kind of where that lands. But this is kind of the stress episode, right? It's like the episode where you get all the zoom in shots of them cutting their hands, or there's like the dishes piling up, or every second counts montage at the end as the every second count sign is continuing to kind of get grimier, dirtier to represent just kind of the chaos of the kitchen. Then you got like the montage of Sid calling out kind of orders from the top of the kitchen, and her bonnet's changing every time. I thought that was a nice little detail. So yeah, this was a good episode. I like all these episodes. Hell, they're all fun, but yeah, it's a little bit more on the stressful side for sure.
Yep, uncut gems in the kitchen. Really quick cutting. Like they're showing us so many dishes, and I can't remember if this is the episode or not. Where I can't wait to talk about the computer, Brian Koppelman's character with his Raiders hat, and him stepping into the show. But like, it's frustrating me as I feel like the power of the show is I feel like an investor in this restaurant. Like I feel like I have a stake in how it performs. I want it to do well. I want it to succeed. And I've never worked in a restaurant like this. I've never owned a piece of a restaurant or a company like this. but I see so many little areas where I would want improvements, and they just keep fucking up over and over and over again. Like the changing the menu every day, and just the fact that like Carmi will make the same dish like 15 to 16 times in research and development, and I can't tell what's different about it, like the way that he's plating it each time, but apparently it is different enough to the point where he throws away not just the food itself into the garbage, but also the plate. So I'm like, just from a budgetary constraint, I'm like, this is ridiculous and you guys are idiots. So like that's where I think the show is so powerful, where when I'm watching this episode and this montage, I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, just fucking figure it out. Like, come on. Like let's do it. Like let me get in there, let me be like let me coach. Like let me get out there and just fucking do something to get Carmi under control, because he's so frustrating.
Yeah, he's pretty wasteful, and it's definitely like a growing theme, right? As they continue to deal with budget problems, or like, why is there not money coming in? Where the beef is packed, the restaurant's full every night. We're doing 2.5 turns now, um, and it's a lot of partially because of Carmen and the way he's doing his research and development. I will say to the changing menu every day credit, it's not like they're changing always the base, like the meat or the entree. They're
The
just
duck.
changing like tiny little things about it on a lot of the time. So like, yeah, we're gonna do the duck, and it's gonna be pretty similar, but we're gonna just slightly, ever so differently change it. And I think that's kind of what Carmi and his argument with Rich. He's like, if we did the beef slightly different every day, like, would that be better? And he's like, yeah, it would actually be better. They're basic. I mean, maybe he's changing the menu every day, right? But maybe 6 months from now, like, they finally found what that dish could be, and it can be a little bit more static at that point. But maybe go to episode 4, Violet. Right, this is another heavy Richie episode.
This is where we get a cameo from Josh Hartnett,
yeah,
from Oppenheimer, and he is going to be in the new M. Night Shyamalan movie called Trap, which they defined as if A Silence of the Lambs took place at a Taylor Swift concert. I'm so pumped for that movie. I think it's going to be fucking awesome. I love him in this. So he is, I can't remember, is it Evie, Richie's daughter's name?
Yeah, that sounds right. We can just roll with that.
And his ex-wife is Tiffany, and this is Richie, us meeting her new husband for the first time, and they have this conversation outside of his.
Is it to-be husband? They still have a wedding.
To-be husband. Yep, right. He had just proposed to her, and he's talking to him about like, I should have asked your permission, bro. Like he's trying to bro down with them, and Richie is just, I think 2 seasons ago, Richie. That's why I love him so much. Because like 2 seasons ago, he would have exploded on this dude and been like, you're a fucking asshole. Don't fucking talk to me. Stay away from my daughter. She's going to call you Waldo. Suck a dick. And now he's, in his black suit, ready to go to work. And he handles it like a fucking man. And that's probably why I love him so much, is just because I've experienced that growth from him. And I think that he's also the best performer in the show. Like, I think Eben Moss-Bachrach is just that guy. And I hope that he gets all the opportunities in the world, because this was a scene that I think with any other performer can be boring, can be predictable, can be weird. But like these two dudes, talking to each other, like I know it was weird and uncomfortable, but like I was like thoroughly on the edge of my seat. I'm like, well, what is going to happen? And then the least chaotic thing that could have happened, and I was still like really satisfied, if that makes sense. Whereas a show that usually I'm most satisfied when the most chaotic thing happens, this was just a conversation between 2 guys that love the same woman, and I was like, that was really nice, actually.
Josh Hartnett's character, I think it's Frank, during the conversation he kept getting closer.
Yeah, I thought they were gonna kiss,
and that was pissing me off. I was like, why? Richie had nowhere to go or nowhere to hide to. His back's already against the wall, and he just keeps getting a little closer and a little closer, and that was making me a little uncomfortable. I was like, oh no.
And he takes so long to spill the beans too, about like, I mean, it's like a minute and a half of screen time, of like until Richie's like, yo, just spit it out, bro. Like he's like, spit it out, dog. And then he does, and I'm like, oh, I thought he was gonna say like he cheated on her or something crazy.
He does mean something bad, right? The way he like, or like something like, yeah, I did kind of sound like he was gonna say I cheated on her or something along those lines. And then we have the follow up. I think a conversation between Nat and Richie too, where he kind of talks a little about his daughter, saying that he's always alone, and Frank being such a baller, like, should I just stay out of her life? And that was, a heartfelt conversation, and kind of what brings the bear, what people love about it, right? So That was good. And then in that conversation too was another time where like Pete came up, and I just kind of noted this as we've only seen Pete on screen through the first 5 episodes like once for
Yeah.
5 seconds, but he's still like a part of this world and a character, and that just kind of once again goes to the breadth of the characters they've built. That this guy who has had minimal screen time and most over the course of most of the show can still have so much personality, and we learn more about Nat and him just through like everyday conversation. And it's like little sweet things like he loves movies or he loves
Yep.
flowers. And
He
we
loves
found out
Friedkin,
earlier,
dude. He likes the
earlier
Stones.
he likes he's a diehard Cubs fan because Rich is like quizzing him on the Cubs. He's just like, yeah, no, all that shit, dude. And it's like him and Richie have all the same exact interests, but they're
so far apart.
completely different people.
Yes, that's why she loves him so much too, and that's why she sticks around with him, because he's so disfamiliar with like the rest of
The dysfunction.
all that crazy family. He's just a normal dude, and that's also probably why we spend the least amount of screen time with him, because he is so normal. Where like, I mean, Sydney says it. She's like, "Why do we do this to ourselves?" And she's like, "Because we're fucking crazy." And all of these people are fucking crazy. Like, I mean, even like a Tina or something like that. Like when she gets, we can't talk about that. Actually, that's episode 6. My bad. All right. Let's do episode 5. So
Yeah.
Chef Terry's restaurant closes.
Yep. Did she retire or did she or did the restaurant just close? Because it was hard
When
to
Richie's on the
fixed.
phone with the whoever the Richie is, whatever that girl's name is, I can't remember, at Terry's restaurant, he's on the phone with her and he's like, "Well, what happened? Like, was it sad when she gave like the exit speech?" And she's like, "No, it was actually fucking perfect and beautiful and grand, and like I couldn't have done it better myself. And even if she had 1,000 tries, it would have been perfect every single time." And he's like, "Well, is she depressed? Like, why is she closing it down?" And you made this point earlier about her emotional intelligence. She's like, "No, I think she's really happy. She just doesn't want to do it anymore." Like one day she woke up and she realized, I've had it with the craziness. I've made my money. I've accomplished my dream, and it has to end at some point. And I think Richie struggles with that because he's at the beginning of this, right? And he came from that environment with Chef Terry, and he's like, "Damn, I could do this for fucking ever here," because everything was so graceful there. He found his groove and his vibe, and he realized, this is the thing I'm good at. This is what I'm meant to do. Why does it have to end ever? Like, I feel like it should be a fairy tale. And now he's in a position at the Bear, and he's like, I have my groove, but like Carmi's fucking everything up for me. Like the vibe is sour. Like I still have the facts around me. I still have Nat.
He's contributing to that though.
Oh,
too.
for sure. For sure. It's not all to blame on Carmi, but like, and I don't know. I just think that like Terry's decision, like it's so inverse to what Carmi's experiencing right now that's why I think it's impactful, because it's like she's at peace with closing the restaurant and they are in pure chaos with opening the restaurant.
Yeah. Yep.
Only 40 days into it too.
And you could tell like the people at least around Carmi know that this is going to be a kind of a big deal to him. I think he says like part of his legacy is just like gone now with like that restaurant closing and being gone. And Nat says, not everything's meant to last forever, nor will it. But you hear like Cicero, does he have like a bigger stick up his ass than usual? And it's kind of like that. He doesn't know, but that's why, I'm sure. He's just going through a tough day. And, I guess if he put as much blood, sweat, and tears as he probably did into that place and learned as much and has as much respect and revere for Chef Terry, it would probably be tough to see kind of like your idol or what you've helped build on some level. Just the next day not exist anymore. So like he maybe had a little bit of a coming to for kind of his own, I don't know, what would the word, Ralph, be? Like his own, not ego, but
yeah, no, I know what you mean. Like, well, it is kind of ego in a way, actually. It's like self-pride, but it's also self-identification, like who he is. And well, all right, can we do Cicero for a second?
Yeah.
I love him. Like every time he comes in and he just waxes poetic about like, the craziest things. Like I think this might have been one of the episodes where he's talking to Carmi. Yeah, it is. It's where he has Computer in. He brings in Computer, played by Brian Koppelman, who, wrote Rounders and Billions and all of these great shows. He brings in Computer and he's talking to Carmi and he's like, "Listen, dude, you can't talk back to me in front of these people because I have Mas Queso in this popsicle stand. And if you think it's turning a fucking profit because of what you're doing, turns out it's not. I just like love the way, like, instead of saying I have a lot of money invested in this restaurant, he says mas queso in a popsicle stand. He's almost infantilizing Carmi to his face. And he's the only person that Carmi actually listens to. Like when when he pulls Carmi over, he shuts him the fuck up. And I'm like, yes, put this fucker in his place, because I'm kind of realizing I'm anti-Carmi right now at this point in the season. But I will root for him the rest of the way, no doubt. But I just love every moment with Cicero. I think he's like the guy that's watched The Godfather 1,000 times. I know this person. This person's been in my life my entire life. There's a familiarity with him. And then he brings in this dude, the computer, who's a walking analysis of finances and how to make things more efficient. And I wanted to say how much I love the Raiders hat, because I just like, that's just a great little character design thing where I see him and I'm like, I know that this guy talked himself into Derek Carr being like a top 3 quarterback in the AFC. Like, that's exactly what the computer is. And I just love that little bit of information. And this is also the episode that we get John Cena too. So just great cameos across the board. The bench is so deep. But to your point about Carmi, it's like, yeah, he's kind of he's shrinking inside of himself because his idol just retired. It'd be like, the same thing probably happened to Kobe when Jordan retired. It's that kind of philosophy.
Right, absolutely. We haven't talked much about Elboy's character here either, Marcus, so far on the show. Getting quite a bit of him and kind of some of his trials and tribulations as he's going through the death of his mother. What is your take on this character, his character so far, and maybe the performance of Elboy, formerly known as part of the Loiter Squad with Tyler, the Creator, and kind of grew up in that world, which makes it all the more enjoyable. Like, that's why this cast rocks in a lot of ways too, right? They're just pulling all these people in from different backgrounds that are all just like, meshing together to make such a realistic group of people that like you could see like working at a Beef, for example, but maybe not the Bear right away. But
I love him. I think my favorite moment about Marcus didn't even involve Marcus, and it's when Computer comes in and he's talking to Nat about this pastry chef. He's an inefficiency in the financing of this place, in the budget of this place. And she says to him, if you fuck with Marcus, I will fucking kill you.
Yeah, I'll murder you, right?
It's right after she had a conversation with Marcus. And it's kind of beautiful because it's like, we see him give the eulogy. He's struggling and is grieving about his mother, who was his world. And at the same time, like, who is he talking to? He's talking to a pregnant Nat. And it's just that little circle of life thing. I think that he has been a revelation the first 2 seasons. I'm not sure I'm as connected with him this season because it has been, I don't want to degrade him and say it's been a one-note performance, but it has kind of, for the most part, it's been very grief heavy. But at the same time, it's like,
he's not the main character.
Sure, right. But like, I just loved, like, I mean, like, the episode, like, we didn't even talk about Violet really, but just that him getting out of the car to take that picture of that violet and the fact that it was a white violet and that was his mother's favorite flower, and then designing a dessert around that. I think that's just really fucking cool stuff. Like, at first when I saw it, I'm like, pretentious. Rewatched it today. I'm like, God damn it, that's pretty beautiful. Like, I connect with Marcus the same way I connect with a Cicero. Like, I just love these people. I'm rooting for them as individual people and not just products of the TV show and products of the restaurant.
Ralph, who was the last person you've haunted?
I don't know if I've ever haunted anybody other than Petey. I feel like, I can hold things over his head. I know things about him that nobody else does. So I'm always kind of haunting him in a way. I mean, there might have been some times in college where I was, pretty chopped and I haunted Hato a little bit. The bad knees, living on the ground floor by himself while the other 3 of us were upstairs. I'd fuck with him every now and then. But I don't know. I'm not a haunting guy. What about you?
Good question. I don't know. I like the idea of haunting. It's fun when you can get a group haunting, especially amongst the roommates in those kind of situations. I like that they're like, dad haunted Uncle whoever for 6 years. Like, it got out of hand.
Yeah. He's like, he made a bunch of money off of it too. Like, he invented like 15 businesses, like something about adopting kids.
He put 1,500 LLCs. He just kept putting LLCs in his name.
Yeah, I mean, I love just that trio of facts because it's like you have, and I don't think we've talked about Teddy enough. I fucking love Teddy Fack. I think he's hilarious. We talked about Matty Matheson. I'm not sure what that performer's name is, but he's the perfect jelly to Matheson's peanut butter. And then you just bring in John Cena, and he's the warm glass of milk. And he looks so unlike the two of them. Like they're both like these are the two dudes that have been eating at not the bear, but the beef for the last 25 years of their life. And Sammy comes in and he's just like, his name is Sammy and he's jacked to the fucking nines and he buffs floors and he's good at his job. And even just him meeting Sydney, like he walks into the kitchen, says, "What up, Unc? What up, computer? What up, Nat?" And he's like, "Who the fuck are you?" And she's like, "I'm Sid. Who are you?" He's like, "I'm Sammy." And they're just like, well, and that's it. Like it's like Io Adebiri and John Cena, like two, people that are probably both going to be in the MCU at some point, just running into each other. Just really cool stuff. I fucking love this show. Like,
yeah, right. I don't know. Like, I didn't know. I guess I haven't really read much critique, or from what I've seen, it's been all pretty positive regarding the show. So I know you mentioned there were some criticisms. I haven't had a lot so far personally. I just really love this show for sure. Maybe I don't know. Do you have any criticisms or things that you'd like to get off your chest?
I understand the criticisms that I heard, and I would agree with them to a certain extent. One of them is that this show has just been like, especially through these first 5 episodes, like not a whole lot has happened. Like we didn't mention, but episode 5 is pretty much all leading up to. Or episode 4 rather was leading up to the photojournalist coming from the Chicago Tribune about the review on the restaurant that had already happened. And I think that that's something that happens in season 1 or season 2 over the course of like an episode rather than 2 episodes. So there does seem like some kind of stagnancy in the storytelling. But to your point, like I like that. I like the idea that we're going to be different and every meal is going to be different. But I know that this was originally supposed to be a 3-season show and they extended it to 4. And so that's where you're just going to have some run-ins with plot.
Is there going to be more seasons than 4? Have they said it's going to only go 4?
Wrapping at 4.
Really? Okay. Good to know. And like you said, the plot hasn't necessarily moved forward a lot. I would agree with that. But I also kind of like that when we opened up season 3, it was like the events of season 2 happened a day or two ago, right? I think we've only jumped a month really in the show. Haven't seen much of Claire. Haven't seen much of Molly Gordon. I wish we could just hang out with Molly Gordon and everything all the time. She's my favorite. So that's a little bit of a disappointment in some ways, or I feel like it's a missing ingredient. Maybe that's comes full circle in season 4. One of the details I liked is, they're talking, her and Carmi talk a little bit about his burnt hand, right? And how some things don't hurt as much in the moment, but then they hurt much more, as time goes on. You have time to think about what took place. And it's obviously a pretty blunt metaphor for how probably Connery's feeling with his relationship with Claire and how that sting and that pain isn't necessarily going away. And one detail I do like is that on the other side of that hand, he has a tattoo and it's a knife going through the front of his hand. And I'm like, ooh, even the tattoo artists are just like cooking.
Yeah, dude. Like, everybody on this show is on all cylinders.
Everybody's on their tins.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all of Carmi's issues are completely self-inflicted. Like the only reason he isn't with Molly Gordon, like the only reason he's not with her is because he fucking had a meltdown in a fridge. That was his fault.
His meltdown is very easily traced back to his upbringing and his family and his brother committed suicide.
No, I understand. But
not to excuse some of his behavior or whatever, but
if he wanted to be with her, he could be. It's his fault that they're not together. It's not because she doesn't like him. It's because he was like, I can't be with you because of the way that I am. And all right, then let's just adjust the way that you are. Let's make, the restaurant is a new menu every week instead of every day. I'm sure that's not going to hurt business too much. In fact, it might help business out, but you just want to make things as chaotic as possible. He embraces that chaos and he feels like that's what, he did stop smoking cigarettes, but he's popping those fucking Nicorette gums like no tomorrow. They're Tic Tacs, dude. He's throwing those things back.
Well, yeah, I'm excited to break down 6 through 10. We'll see where the rest of the season leads us. If any indication of the first 5 episodes, to your point, I don't think we're going to necessarily cover that much time in space with this show in the last 6 episodes. I think it's going to be pretty micro-focused still. I guess in terms of resolutions or things that I'm hoping to see in the last 5 episodes, I just want to see Richie and Carm, like, there are some wonderful scenes in the first 2 seasons, whether it's like them driving, and sitting in a car together and just having like a man-to-man discussion, or some of Richie's realizations that he, had from going and working at Ever and being just a fuller version of himself. I think I just want to see a little bit more character growth. Like, we've seen it with Richie, but like, who's the character that we've seen the most growth in this year? Like, who is like the person that I could say from episode 1 to episode 10, the line side has changed. And that's maybe what
there is one.
That's maybe what I'm looking for, maybe in the back half of this season.
I like that. I would also like to see, let's get Claire Bear back in the mix here, because she's been pretty absent the first 5 episodes. So give me Molly Gordon. We want to spend more time with her. And then maybe one more cameo. I think one more cameo would be nice. We don't have to force anybody. It could be like a return. It could be Odenkirk coming back, or Bernthal coming back, or Jamie Lee Curtis again, like any of them, or Mulaney, whoever it has to be. It doesn't have to be another John Cena level player. But yeah, I'd like to see another cameo too.
Is John Cena level? I mean, I guess that's because it's a brand new cameo, right? Like, we had never seen this character.
Yeah.
But when you start going down the list of names that now have appeared in The Bear, they're starting to rack up like one of the all-time casts.
Oh, 100%. Like, I mean, it's like pulling in, that flex last season of all those people in that one Christmas episode. That was like a bigger flex than Succession pulling in Skarsgård. Like, that was crazy. Yeah, maybe a Bill Hader appearance. I think I'd like to see him in this show, or in this universe. I'm just trying to think of like guys I would like to see like under this camera, like with this lighting, stuff like that. And I think Hader would pull it off well. Like, if he could have been McHale. That would have been a good casting.
I think Hader could have been Mulaney too, though.
Oh, for sure. He would have killed Mulaney. Mulaney's perfect. But this has been fun. Once again, I mean, I'm really loving this show. It is my favorite out of the 3, like you said, too, between this, Dragons, and Boys. But yeah, we'll be back. Let's do it next week. Let's give everybody the holiday weekend to watch the rest of The Bear, and we will talk about it next week. So that'll be after our conversation about episode 4 of House of the Dragons. And then before you know it, I mean, it's July, man. College football is coming up. Turner and Caps will be back with some rent money stuff. So really excited about that. We have one more major left this year for golf.
Yeah, the British Open. Caps and I will be previewing that. We'll probably preview the Tour Championship as well, and the playoffs for the PGA. Adam and I are on a bit of the outs right now. He talked me out of a Cam Davis to win ticket last week, 65-1. Some words were exchanged. It kind of felt a little bit like a Richie and Carm situation, but don't worry, we're going to patch it up a little bit quicker than them.
Okay, good to hear. Yeah, I think I might like to listen to an episode of a fuck yous between the two of you, a la Richie and Carmen episode 2.
There were some things said. I was at a wedding and I was like, Adam, why are you so upset right now? I'm the one that should be pissed. I was just trying to soak and bask in love while also talking my boy off the ledge.
Yep, he felt bad. That's all right. At least there was some remorse there. All right, thank you guys for listening. We love you, and we will see you next week talking about House of the Dragon. Peace out. I'm loving the pop off.